if you go back and you look at websites from the mid 1990s, we all laugh now, and there's like nostalgia, and we're like, oh my god, like how did we use that, right? You remember the AOL like dial-up sound and the little man running across the screen and like all that stuff, and we're like, that's crazy. But now here we are, almost 30 years later, and like look at how amazing some of these websites look and things like that. I think Bitcoin and the broader industry is going through the exact same thing, right? And a very simple thing is just like, if your palms sweat and your heart beats fast when you've got to send Bitcoin to someone, we probably got to fix that, right? Because there's a lot of people who they're just not going to do it, right? And
Anthony Pompilano, one of the most famous crypto investors and entrepreneurs, has speculated the position of Bitcoin in 2023. He believes that use of Bitcoin as a payment method is one of the biggest inventions of 21st century. He says that the idea of Bitcoin, from where it started, where it is moving and what is the future next, is breathtaking to know. Furthermore, he has suggested that if we want to see Bitcoin at the top, we must know what things can keep it moving forward. Watch this interview till the end and understand what possible solution Anthony gives for Bitcoin success. Before moving ahead, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button and share it with your friends.
trust is kind of compounded over years and years and years and years. And what's a little crazy is we've been doing the right things. It's just there's been a bunch of people who've been doing stupid things as well. And so those people get kind of cleared out. Free market dynamics take over. Bad people who do bad things eventually get, kind of uncovered and they get washed out. But what I do think is very interesting is the people who have been doing the right thing, they were here before. They're still here now. They'll be here in the future. And so for those people, I think one is just like, don't get discouraged that, the people who are doing dumb things get attention, they get capital, they get all these things, but ultimately this is not a sprint. It is very much a marathon. And so if you look at, Bitcoin's history and kind of the broader industry, what's fascinating to me is we're only 15 years into this. Eventually we're going to be talking about 50 years into this. And so what are the companies, who are the people who are still going to be here then? That's really, I think, where like the true signal is. There's two core arguments or talking points that I try to hammer home. The first is this technology is as about American as it gets in terms of the ability to have free markets, the ability to really embrace capitalism, the ability to allow people to pursue the American dream. It returns a bunch of rights and kind of individual liberties back to citizens themselves. And it's done in a way where it's very hard for people to corrupt it or to get too much control, too much power, too much economic might. And so I think that's the first thing. It's just like this is an American technology from an ethos standpoint. And then the second thing is it is one of the fastest growing economic sectors in the world. You can look at both the economic value that's created and captured. You can look at job creation. You can look at kind of the investment portfolios, like all these different components. And so if you want America to continue to be a leader, both from a capital market standpoint, but also an impact on the citizens, then you have to embrace this. And so if you can combine the ethos of kind of American society, democracy, and capitalism with the potential impact that it can have to the actual wallets of American citizens, hey, we got to get this right. Now, where there's a lot of debate is what is right? What are the rules? How should we enforce them? Who should be in charge? All that stuff is up for debate. But I think just getting people to understand this is important and we got to get it right, that is actually a big leap forward from where we were 2 or 3 years ago. We're getting there. Now let's get forward and let's kind of figure out what those rules should be. But what I do think is very unique is that Bitcoin has zero interest and doesn't care what's going on Twitter. And so if there's one thing that I kind of fall back on is like the Bitcoin network is going to continue to produce blocks of transactions regardless of what the conversation on Twitter is. Now, to your point, we can be successful and shoot ourselves in the foot, or we can be successful and make it a little bit easier for ourselves. And so what I think has really happened now is the people who have certain communication tactics, they're very self-aware of what they're doing. And we should actually embrace that communication and we should use it for what it is valuable for, right? I don't think that people are going to create memes, print them out on a piece of paper and show up to politicians' office and hand them to them. No, it's very much for the digital realm. It's there to kind of combat all the FUD and all that type of stuff. At the same time, what we need is we need tons of people who say, hey, that's not my strength. I have these other strengths. Let me go and do that. And so I think about it less about hey, let's tone down the people on the internet or tone down the people who maybe, have kind of different tactics. And instead, let's really ratchet up all the other abilities that we have. And if you can get them onto equal footing, that's pretty much a beast, in terms of the ability for us to communicate. It's a lot of work, right? That ends up being the difficult part. think the first thing that jumps to mind is just we're really good at building infrastructure. Obviously, I think Bitcoin as a payment network itself, like the software of Bitcoin, the design of Bitcoin, is the single greatest invention in our lifetime. There's a lot of other things that people have done that are amazing, but I think that when you really sit down and you understand just what Bitcoin has been able to accomplish, it's breathtaking. And in order for Bitcoin to have reached the amount of success that it has, you need to build all the infrastructure. You have to get the mining network out there, all that stuff. So that's great. Then if you turn and you look and you say, okay, what are the things that maybe we need to get better at? One of the biggest things is the design, the user experience, right? The interfaces of this stuff. If you go back and you look at websites from the mid 1990s, we all laugh now, and there's like nostalgia, and we're like, oh my god, like how did we use that, right? You remember the AOL like dial-up sound and the little man running across the screen and like all that stuff, and we're like, that's crazy. But now here we are, almost 30 years later, and like look at how amazing some of these websites look and things like that. I think Bitcoin and the broader industry is going through the exact same thing, right? And a very simple thing is just like, if your palms sweat and your heart beats fast when you've got to send Bitcoin to someone, we probably got to fix that, right? Because there's a lot of people who they're just not going to do it, right? And so that's a dumb one. It's a simple thing. But I think that's the type of stuff that as more and more people come in who have experience building consumer products, have experience with design, user interfaces, things like that, it'll just naturally improve. But those aren't the people who first discover some of these technologies and are like, hey, let me go do it. And so I think it's just like get more people into the industry and then let them do what they're best at. And the beauty of kind of these like open source type communities is that people show up, they work on what they're interested in. And next thing you know, we've got the best team in the world, and we didn't have to pay them. We didn't have to, go do recruiting firms. They just showed up because they were interested in the idea. What's fascinating to me is, if you start to kind of zoom out just from like Bitcoin and crypto industry, you have Tesla, you have a lot of these different factories, manufacturing and types of businesses that have the people who work there are also very interested in things like Bitcoin. And so you can see a world where there might be some people who on the weekends and nights are working on Bitcoin stuff and they're working at, let's say, a Tesla factory. Well, then vice versa. Maybe at some point they're like, hey, you know what? I've done this for 3, 4, 5, 6 years. Now I actually want to go work on this stuff full time. And so what you're really just doing is you're attracting technical people who really like to build things, and you put them together. And even if they're not working on it full time, naturally some of that intelligence, that capital seeps into the industry, which I think is just a tailwind and makes a place like Austin really special.